Nancy asked me to introduce Wendy, and I'm going to use an introduction which I've used before because it always occurs to me when people like Wendy and Buzz come to visit, which is a friend of mine years ago asked me, well, what do you get from following Meher Baba? He says, like, do you get out-of-body experiences? I'd like to have one of those. I said, no, we don't get that. He says, well, you get any psychic powers or anything like that? I said, no. He said, what do you get? And I said, well, I guess you get love. He says, oh, I don't want love. But one of the things that we get is this wonderful extended international Baba family. Often dysfunctional at times. But I'm not referring to Wendy now. I'm just talking about the international Baba family. No, not Wendy. But it is this great gift that Baba gives us that we get to have people like Wendy and Buzz come from great distances, in this case Myrtle Beach, and we know that we'll get to see them here or in Myrtle Beach or in India, and it's like a little reunion every time that we get together with them. And that's one of Baba's great gifts, I feel, to us as a community. And since he's no longer here in the body, he has blessed us with visits from loved ones like this. Wendy, now the other thing is I was thinking, just as I was sitting over there, I was asked to introduce her, but I don't remember many details anymore. So I don't remember, did you meet Baba in 56? Okay, in 58. Then she went to the East-West Gathering in India in 62, and I'm sure she'll bring up a lot of that in what she's going to, in her comments today. But one great thing is that Wendy had the benefit of having, it's kind of like Sleeping Beauty, if you've seen that movie and everything. She had the 3 fairy godmothers, and that was Elizabeth and Margaret and Kitty. And I would imagine she'll probably tell us some stories about them today too. And I will just, before I actually bring her up here, I will say that for those of you who don't know Wendy that well, she has a background in theater, and she's a very dramatic storyteller. She also, when she first came to visit our group in 1982 at the LA Sahabas, she impressed many of us by getting up on stage after hours and doing the Funky Chicken, accompanied by Michael Campagna on piano. So she has a great sense of fun, and it's a great. Were you gonna? Did I miss something?
I was going to say she's known as Baba's Gazelle.
She's known as Baba's Gazelle? I didn't know that. That's a story which you're going to have to tell. Okay. Well then, without further ado, here's Baba's Gazelle.
Well, I do have psychic powers. Jeff, you got that wrong. Wait a minute. I have a story to tell. Is this going to happen? Now, this is like me. I do use my hands a lot. So I'll probably be knocking it a lot.
Don't worry about it.
Okay. Whoops, okay. I think so. Yeah, because I'll have to refer to some of these. This is to keep me from rambling. Yeah, thank you. Am my lips smacking? I always get photographs with my tongue out or the cup, you know. Don't you? That's why.
No, it was a very nice one.
Well, that's why I hesitated. I'm very aware of you. Well, first I want to say how happy Buzz and I are to be here at this beautiful center. What a beautiful place. You know, we've never seen this place. The last center I was at was 1982, the early one. So this is beautiful. And when we came through the gates, it reminded me of Meherzad, you know, which actually Lynn had said that to me too, that it reminded her. But I felt it as we came through. And then the bougainvillea, of course, right outside the door here. It's so beautiful. So thank you for having us, and thank you for being inspired, Nancy, to invite us. You know, I often tell my story of meeting Baba for the first time in 1958. I was 6 years old, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. But today, what I'd like to do is focus on 1962. When I was 11 years old, big difference, you know. I was quite mature. Actually, I wasn't, but there's a tremendous difference, really, as you can imagine, between, especially those of you who have children, between 6 years old and 11 years old. When I was 6, I was instantly captivated by Baba, and I loved him as naturally as a child loves their mother or father. I couldn't stay away from him. All I wanted was to be with Baba. And any opportunity to go up to Baba, to be near him, was really all I thought about. Any time Baba was around, everything else faded into the background, including my mother, which is really quite extraordinary. You can take that a number of ways. So I'd like to set the stage for 62 Gathering to tell you a little bit about the years between 58 and 62. Right after Baba left on May 30th, he left Myrtle Beach, went back to India, we received our first cable from Baba. I want to share it with you because the reason I want to share it with you is it began a pattern of communication that was to continue through our lives with Baba and through my mother's life until she passed away in 97. So we had messages all the time, or often, from Baba, from Mommy, from Mara, and they meant everything to us. So this was the very first cable that came. Keep happy in my love, and let your dear 3 little ones love me more and more. Love, Baba. Miss you, just Baba. You know, one thing that happened right after Baba left is that Charles Purdom, you know Charles Purdom, of course, who wrote The Guardian, stayed behind to direct my mother in a play at her theater. My mother had a summer stock theater just 1 mile down the road from the center. And he directed my mother in a play called Separate Tables, in case you've seen the movie. Wonderful play. And Kitty was in that play. She played the waitress. She actually filled in. Kitty was very nervous in front of people, hated to perform, but she filled in for someone at the last minute. She played the waitress, Mabel. And she was so nervous, bless her heart. She came on stage with the tray, trembling like this. And, oh dear, oh dear. She couldn't remember her lines, and then she dropped the tray. So it was a memorable evening. Kitty never went back on the stage again. That was it. But the reason I mention the play is because that experience inspired Charles Purdom to write Baba without my mother's knowledge, saying to Baba, I think Jane ought to come study acting in London.
Wow.
But my mother had no idea that Charles Purdom had done this. And Mother gets a reply from Baba saying you're not to go to London, but you can go to New York. Because Baba knew, of course, Mother was interested in studying acting. She'd been in theater all her life, from early on, had been in producing and directing and the whole aspect of everything. But she'd never really studied acting with a supreme, really good teacher. So the plan was that we would move to New York and Mother would study with Lee Strasberg at Actors Studio. So that's what Baba gave his permission for, and it was really quite a surprise to Mother, out of the blue, that we would get this message from Baba. There's a way of telling you that that's why we left. We left Myrtle Beach in January of 1959 to move to New York City. That's where we met Nancy, and we met all the New York group, wonderful group of people. And Adele was there then, of course, and Phyllis lived there then. And it was just a wonderful group to be a part of, the famous Monday night group. And but it was very hard for us to leave Myrtle Beach because we were very close with Elizabeth and Kitty. And in fact, we spent all of any spare moment with them. We met them before we met Baba, so they really were our link to Baba. And through our first introduction to how people can be with Baba. So loving and so, and Kitty, of course, was full of fun. And anyway, it was very a big adjustment for us, is what I'm trying to say, to move to New York and leave them behind. Knowing that, Elizabeth came to New York quite a bit, and we would come to Myrtle Beach about 4 times a year, come back and forth. And Annie Boo, I'm sorry, I should tell you, for those of you who don't know, I call Elizabeth Annie Boo because when she was a little girl, she couldn't say Elizabeth. She called herself Boo. So when she grew up and had nieces and nephews, they called her Aunt Boo. So when I came along, that's the first thing she said to me was, "You must be Wendy. You may call me Auntie Boo." I was 5 years old, and I never forgot that first meeting. So that's why if I say Annie Boo, you'll know I mean Elizabeth Patterson. Okay, so Annie Boo would come up to New York a lot and take us to the theater and take us to restaurants, and she knew New York like the back of her hand. But the really exciting stories I want to tell you, because Jeff mentioned in his intro about stories, I'm going to try to slip in some about Kitty and Annie Boo as I go through this, because there's so many stories to tell, and my challenge is not what to tell you. I mean, yes, it's to pick out, because there's so many stories. That's why I have notes to try to keep me on track. So if I get off track, just say, "Wendy, come on back." Because I could spend an hour talking just about Elizabeth and Kitty. But I do want to tell you this, that Kitty, when my mother would take a show on the road, Kitty would come and babysit for us. And that was amazing because, and now, in those days, once you come into Baba's orbit, everything revolves around Baba. So in those days, everything had to be cleared with Baba. So Baba gave permission for Kitty. In other words, he orchestrated every detail, and every detail was sent back and forth between Myrtle Beach and Baba, sometimes relayed through Moni, that Kitty had permission to come be with us, to be with the trio. By that time, Baba called us trio, his trio. I had two older brothers, Charles and John, 2 years apart. Anyway, so Kitty would come, and those were the highlights. That happened on 2 separate 3-month occasions. And I tell you, that was just something I'll never forget. I mean, Kitty was so cute because she loved games. Kitty was a great game player. She loved to walk. So we lived right next to Central Park. What was that? Thought it was me. She just loved to play games. So she taught us canasta and dominoes and Scrabble and all that. And every once in a while, Charles and I would get into a little squabble. More than once in a while. We were closest in age. And Kitty, not having ever had children, didn't know what to do. And she would, oh dear. She'd sort of get like this. You could see she was getting very disturbed, and she'd sort of jump between us and go, "Oh, Johnny Doe, Johnny Doe, Johnny Doe." And we had no idea. Oh, thank you. We had no idea what she was saying, But it worked, it would sort of stop us in our tracks. So finally, about the third time, we asked Kitty, who is Johnny? Kitty went, whenever Kitty got really tickled, she'd go, "Oh, no, dear, no. Johnny Doe means let it go. Let it go." And she explained to us that that's what Baba would do in the ashram. He would often come amongst them when they would be squabbling like this over something small, usually petty and small. And Baba would come in and spell out Johnny Doe. Janebo. I don't know what language that is. Does anybody know? Anyway. So that was so cute because it worked. I mean, for a while. Then we'll forget that. But anyway, well, really, also the cables that would come would always come at the right moment. Like when my mother in the theater world, as those of you who've been in the performing arts know how difficult that is. How difficult it can be to get ahead or to even get a part, especially in New York City. So Mother would have a terrible time. And just when she was at her lowest, a cable would come from Baba saying, "Don't worry, Jane. Be happy. I'm always with you." Or, "Don't be afraid. Don't be nervous. Love, Baba." Always at the right moment. Well, Now time became measured by when would we see Baba again. That's really all we thought about. And of course the messages, we'd run to the door whenever the mail came. Oh, I know what I want to tell you. No, wait a minute. I knew there was something I forget. Yes, I wanted to tell you, I have a letter that I thought you would enjoy. That I wrote Kitty when I heard she was coming. I was 8 years old. Dear Kitty, I love you. I am so glad you are coming. Buff, which is Charles's dog, Buff is find, F-I-N-D. Please bring the cards. I can't wait to see you. We will have such a good time together. School is wonderful. Mother's working hard. Baba's helping her every day. We get $10 each to spend. This was when Kitty was coming to babysit. But you keep it for us, Mother said. I'm looking forward to seeing you. I love you. Love, Wendy. So that was the kind of letters that would go back and forth to Kitty and Annie Boo. Now, I mentioned Buff in the letter. I also had a cat named Puff. Now, this is very important to mention. Now, I know, we thought they were very original names at the time. I did. Anyway. But, so, what was so sweet is that Baba would, in one cable, Baba mentioned them. Baba said, love to Buff and Puff. As well, isn't that wonderful? As well as all of us at the end, and my love to Buff and Puff. And then one day, just to give you an idea of the correspondence that went back and forth, Monty, whom I felt like I knew already, even though I hadn't met her yet, but I felt like I had. One day, she sent me this poem that she wrote about Puff. And this is so like Monty. You know how she was. She wrote this. I am Puff, a bit of fluff from the garment of his love. With his breath, I was born on a journey forlorn. Till I landed at last like a happy, happy dove in the home of his own, where only love I had known from sweet Wendy, her brothers, and Jane. Even Buff, who looks rough, is more than gentle enough, for I am Baba's kitten, the rain. Wonderful. And that's so classic, so characteristic of Monty. And she'd send little cards, like with a little girl on the front, with a watering can, and she'd write above it. Say little, these messages meant so much. She said little Wendy tending his flowers in his garden, things like that. Precious, precious things. Hard to believe that she's gone. Well, finally the news came that we could go to India, and we were so happy. I mean, that's exactly what we've been living for and hoping for. And this was to be the first time Baba would bring his lovers together from the East and West. There was to be about 150 of us from the United States, Australia, New Zealand, and England, of course, and about 3,000 from India, but that turned out to be about 15,000 by the third day, when word spread that Baba was giving darshan. And that Baba said we could be with him for 4 days, from November 1st to November 4th. So what I want to do is just give you some highlights of that gathering, because again, there's so many stories of things that happened. First, to tell you this, I was thrilled, of course, to be going to India. I had no idea where India was, and I'd never been on an airplane before, so it was an amazing experience to get on a jet plane, any plane but a jet, and to be going all the way to India. And I was 11 years old by now, and I got to get out of school for 3 weeks, which is always fun. At least it was then. I don't know if that's true now. And so it was really an amazing. I guess I want to try to convey to you the sense of excitement about this trip was so extraordinary that we were going all the way across the globe to see Baba in his homeland. And I had no idea what to expect. Well, when we got there, just as you all well know, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have been to India. the first thing that struck me was the heat. I mean, and of course the poverty was shocking. But I felt it was so different. I felt like we'd gone to another planet. I could not have imagined anything so different. I could not have ever imagined. And we were met by Merji. It was our first meeting with the men disciples, except of course I had met Erich in 58. Now I have no memory of Erich in 58 at all. He says he was there. But, and he was. But I mean, I have no memory at all, because when you were with Baba, really, no, you didn't ever think of anybody else. And except when I was older, I did notice, again, in East-West Gathering, I was more aware of Erich. Anyway, so we met Merji. Merji took us to our hotel, and then we took the train to Pune the next day. And then we met Baba's brother, Jal, for the first time. And Jal took us to all the Baba places that you know that are so famous. Baba's home, Deccan College, St. Vincent's High School, Sassoon Hospital, all those places for the first time, Pumpkin House. And I was just enthralled. And it was my first sense of Baba as an Easterner. You know, because when I met Baba in America, I thought of him as a Westerner. And he looked Western to me. Baba did not seem like a stranger at all. You know, in fact, it's extraordinary to me when I look back that I was completely captivated by Baba, and yet he was a stranger. And I was meeting him for the first time, but not for 1 second did Baba feel like a stranger. It's just like coming home. So here I was in his home, and feeling that sense of his homeland, and that he was an Easterner. So that was wonderful, seeing all those places. Now, by this time, it's October 30th. The reason I mention that date is because when we got back from sightseeing, we found out that my brother John had been called to see Baba. My brother John had been called to see Baba. The only Westerner to see Baba that day. Because it was his birthday. Isn't that sweet? And John had lots of questions. This Baba sign for what's troubling you, what's weighing on you, what's worrying you, what he's doing about all those things that we all know so well. And John had lots of questions. He was 15 by then. And he went, armed with all these questions. And he tells the story very beautifully about how as soon as he came into Baba's presence, Baba looked at him. And do you have any questions? And John couldn't think of a one. Not a one. Well then, so that was the 30th. Now the next day, Baba arranged for the women to come meet the women Mangali for the first time. You remember it now? And that was amazing. It was like meeting family. It was like coming home. I mean, I felt like I had known him always, and of course we had been in correspondence with mine and Mara too. Some, Mara not as much, because she was more in seclusion, but it was just so natural meeting them. And they were very loving and very, and Mani was very playful. But what I was going to tell you is, I want to back up a moment and tell you this, that I was feeling very shy about seeing Baba again. Because there is a tremendous difference between age 6 and 11. And I was more self-conscious, more nervous. I had come to understand that I had met the Christ, in God in human form. That was not an awareness I had at 6 years old, obviously. But in the meantime, I began to get some awareness of that. And so I was a little more nervous, needless to say, this time about seeing Baba. I didn't have lots of questions, but I was just nervous. So this is the day now we're going to meet the women. And Bob, the bus comes to pick us up, and we had to wear those badges. I'm sure you've seen them. And to get in, because lots of people were trying to get into this event. So you had to have your badge in order to get in. And anyway, the bus pulled up. Now, Guru Prasad, you all have seen the pictures, and many of you have probably been there before it was torn down. was very beautiful, and they called it a bungalow, but it, to me, was like a palace. I mean, it was so beautiful, all this marble and, you know, columns, and it was quite beautiful. So I was very struck by this beautiful place. We come up, and the doors are flung open, you know, and Baba is sitting on the blue sofa, wearing a blue coat, and what am I trying to say? No, I'm going to get this. It's much easier for me to speak gibberish, by the way. Okay, what I want to say is that my view of Baba was blocked. I couldn't see Baba right away. And all of a sudden, a couple of people parted, and I saw Baba through the doorway. And I instantly forgot my shyness and dashed forward. And Baba pulled me into a big embrace. He looked very happy, big smile. And Baba said, and I knew he was saying, he said, "Are you happy? Are you happy to see me?" I said, "Yes, Baba, I'm so happy. I'm doing this gypsy." And then Baba said, "Hey, I like this one." Well, in 58, Baba had done this. The second thing Baba did to me in 58 was like this, how tall I had gotten. Now, you know, I was not aware of anybody translating in 58, even now, because some of the gestures were so easy. I mean, they were so simple. You knew what Baba was saying. And this time, Baba started higher. I said, "Yes, Baba, I'm very tall." And I was very tall for 11. I was as tall as Mommy. There's a picture of me, maybe a smidgen smaller than she is, so it was so sweet. But to be in Baba's embrace, all time stopped. There was no sense of people, nobody there, just Baba. Anyway, then Baba had Mera come out to meet us, and that was amazing. So she was so beautiful and shy, a little shy, but happy to meet us. And happy to put the faces with the names, you know, because she'd been hearing about Jane Trio and all the different ones from Myrtle Beach that she hadn't met. Because Mera, as you know, the women only went in 52 and didn't go back since then. And then Monty and Gohir, we met all the women. And you know, most of the gathering, my head is full of stories, that's why I'm hesitating, but a lot of the time I was inside Gurupasad with the women Mandali. I was going to say the women Mandali were not out very much. In other words, they were not in the hall when they were, obviously Mera couldn't be in the hall because she was in seclusion, but you know, Baba let us have private time in the morning, what he called the AM session, that we had that private time. And we had the afternoon time as well with the Easterners out back. In the back, you've seen the films and the pandal. Well, the first official morning, that was the day with the women. And by the way, in the afternoon, the men got to see the men Mandali. They got to go and have a visit with Baba. Then the next day was the first official day of darshan. And Baba has us sit in a semicircle. Well, first we get an embrace again. Everybody gets one embrace. And in fact, Baba said, "No more now, after today, no more embraces or I'll be limp." You know, because he had to give so much. Baba's sign for love, by the way, is from the stomach, not from the heart, but from here. Baba was always doing this outside for hour after hour after hour. You've seen the films of Baba doing it, and you were there, so you know. And anyway, so when we were sitting with Baba in the mornings, it was very intimate. I think Baba felt we needed it more, that we needed this extra time. It was so wonderful to have this private time with Baba. And Baba would always start off with basic questions about your health. Baba would say, touch his pulse. How's your health? Did you rest well? Did you eat? Very simple. You know, you didn't need anybody saying, because you could read those signs. Now Baba, and he always started every morning that way. And I was so struck by that looking back years later. I was so struck by that emphasis on health and resting and eating well. And I came to feel that Baba wanted us to do our part. to do our part to eat well and rest well. And that if we were ill, we knew it was His will. And his mom used to say His gift. If we had an illness that came anyway, but we had to do our part. And also He didn't want us to be distracted. It's very distracting to be ill, as you know. It's hard not to not think of oneself when we're ill. So it's so striking to me when I think back on that time. I mean, Baba, everything with Baba was so natural. No white lights and bolting, except his love. It's like the bolt of lightning sometimes. But I mean, he did everything so naturally. It's not until later that I started thinking about what did Baba mean by that, or why did he do that? Baba loved to tease certain people a lot, and one of them was Ben Haynes from Texas. Now, Ben had narcolepsy. You remember how Ben would go like this, going. He couldn't help it, Of course, he couldn't help it, And Baba would go, Ben, are you awake? And this was a running joke from 52 on. And Ben would snap out, oh, yes, Baba, yes, Baba, yes, Baba. He was Southern, that's right. Yes, Baba, I'm awake. And then he'd go back down again. But this went on through the entire gathering. Baba would do that, and Baba would be delighted whenever Ben would wake up. And Baba would, again, the mornings were spent asking personal questions, drawing people out about how was your trip over, how's the health of your spouse. And one day, Bunty Kelly, Baba turned to her, Margaret Bernstein's mother, and she had just left her baby behind. I don't know how old Margaret was, a few months, I think. And she was worrying. And Baba turned to her and said, excuse me, Margaret, you're worrying about the baby. She said, yes, Baba. Yes, Baba, about the baby. Yes, Baba. And because she hadn't brought the baby. And Baba said, don't worry. Don't worry about the baby. Baba said, because if you do, then I can't. He said, I'll worry about the baby. Let me worry about the baby. You be here with me. So that's the kind of atmosphere it was, very intimate every morning with Baba. Then in the afternoons, quite different. I mean, thousands of people. And by the way, Baba would say, this first morning, Baba was very particular about the instructions he gave us. He said, you go and you rest well, wear a hat, because you're not used to the sun. So wear a hat, eat well, and then come back at 1:45, be in the back of the pandal. Everything was very specific. And time was important to Baba. In reality, there is no time, but in illusion, time was very important to Baba. How we used it. So we were in the back, ready to be with Baba, and the women were on the facing the stage. The women were on the right side, the men were on the left, and then behind us were the thousands of Easterners. And there were about 4,000, I think, that first day. They estimated, of course, they didn't know. And I'll never forget when Baba came out on the stage. He came out so beautiful. Baba came out and he had his hands like this. And I tell you, that crowd jumped to its feet and yelled out, Avatar MeherBaba Ki Jai, 3 times. Actually, I think it went on for longer than that. It just swelled through the crowd. Actually, today reminded me when you all, after we did Auntie, reminded me of that. But Baba's gesture was so beautiful. I salute the highest in you as you salute the highest in me. That's what Baba told us that meant. It was so beautiful. And then Baba said, so every afternoon there was something planned, the story of Baba's life in different languages, and Baba. And always Qawwali music and harmonium players. And Baba loved the music so much. He would sway back and forth like this, Baba said. And he would have people translate the Hafez. Baba would stop it and translate it. It was so beautiful to watch him. Baba's pleasure in the music. And Baba would say, if you could only understand what I do, if you could only know they're talking about how differently you would experience this. You could see his bliss. He was in bliss. The music was so beautiful. Baba, they had the best Qawwali singers come and sing for us. And Auntie was performed twice, not every day. I mean, we did Auntie every day, but in this way, there were 7 women wearing different colored saris, the colors of Baba's flag. And they came in front of Baba below the stage and had trays of camphor lit. And they would stand before Baba and sing the Auntie. Now, in those days, it was the Eastern Auntie. It wasn't the Gujarati Auntie. It was an Auntie called the Eastern Auntie, which you hear sometimes. It's, Arati Sri Karo, that one, which you don't hear much on this side of the world. But anyway, so that was very beautiful, timeless feeling. And Baba would just be swaying with the music like this. One morning, Baba asked, when we're back with Baba in the morning, Baba asked Lenny Willoughby if he would sing He's Got the Whole World in His Hands. And Lenny had sung, it's a spiritual, of course, as you know, he had sung it for Baba in 58. So Baba asked Lenny to sing it. And Lenny got up. Now, Lenny didn't have a great voice, and he sang out of tune. But Baba was so sweet, Baba was like this. And he sings it with a lot of gusto. And Baba's like, and he touches heart. And then Baba say, I'll read you the exact quote, but I remember this, Baba holding his hand up. And you see him the whole quote there. Yes. Baba said this, he said, your voice speaks the truth, Baba says. I'm very happy to have the whole world in my hands. He said, it's like a speck of dust. And it's so calm and so tiny. I hold it in my hands. But another time, someone said to Baba, how well you look. And Baba said, well, if you only knew of my suffering, he said, I look all right on the outside, but on the inside, I am like a volcano. The world situation is weighing on me. Jesus Christ suffered. I suffer. And you know that was the height of the Cuban Missile Crisis. And it was also the Chinese were invading the Indian border at that time. In fact, many people discouraged us from going to India and were very concerned about this particular time, that they thought we were crazy to go to India in view of the world situation. And one thing I wanted to tell you is that I felt, and maybe it was because I was older, but there was a real difference in Baba this time. In 1950, one thing I noticed is that Baba's eyes darted around the room continuously. He kept moving. He rarely would rest his eyes on you. In 58, Baba would really look at you, and his eyes would focus on you. But in 62, it was just continual. He was very alert, but his suffering, he let us see his suffering more. And he was suffering. Baba was definitely in pain. And also, as he said, the weight of the world situation. But I was so struck by that, by Baba. And so that when his eyes did rest on you, it was really like, an amazing sort of moment. I wanted to tell you, one morning, well, actually it was in the afternoon, and it was the first afternoon. Baba was sitting there with Baba, and we haven't been out there very long, and Baba goes, it was unbelievably hot, by the way. I mean, so hot, especially if you weren't used to that kind of heat. And Baba went like this once. And Erich said, Baba says it's hot, it may rain. Well, my dear, 3 seconds later, boom. I mean, it was unbelievable. Torrential rain just poured down. And it came down so heavily that it broke the women's side. It broke the front of the pandal where the women were sitting. Remember that, Adele? And we all got soaking wet. I mean, we were absolutely drenched. But the wonderful thing about that is that Baba had us come up on stage and go back into Guru Prasad. And the women mandali had to find clothes for us. And that was wonderful. We got to go, and you should have seen, it was like a scene out of a movie. they were pulling trunks out and things that they had left groups out the store. And they were throwing clothes, and we were trying them on. I know my mother ended up wearing something of Meru's, and I was wearing something of Monty's, and we looked rather motley, but I actually kind of charming clothes. And but the one person they couldn't find anything for was Elizabeth. And now Elizabeth was Baba's rock. You know, Baba would say, this is Baba's sign for Elizabeth: tip of the hat, which means Westerner. And chunky. She was a little chunky. Elizabeth was my box. So she rarely got upset, that's my point. If you had to sum up, if you had to say one word or attribute to describe Elizabeth, it would be equipoise. Always poised. But I have to say, her poise was getting a little disturbed by the fact that they couldn't find anything for her to wear, because she really wanted to come back out. And there wasn't anything that fit her, because she was bigger than the rest of us. And she was getting more and more, you could see a little more and more distraught. And all of a sudden, Rano unearths this bathrobe that was Elizabeth's in the Nasik ashram, that Elizabeth had left behind and given to Rano to keep, to have. And there it was. So Auntie Boo was so thrilled, so they tried it on. It fit beautifully. It was a very beautiful bathrobe, by the way. Burgundy with pinstripes, thin blue pinstripes and silk, and covered with darn patches, you know, little darn. Auntie Boo's favorite thing to do was to darn in her spare time, which she didn't have very much of. But anyway, so she was thrilled. Her face lit up. She came out. She was all in the robe. And Baba looks at Auntie Boo. And now you remember that man in orange, Yogi Bharati, sitting at Baba's feet? Baba said he was a fifth plane saint. And he sat there the whole time. And this day, when we all came out, but Baba had Elizabeth stay back. And now Auntie Boo used to tell this story with such delight. She said, and yes, you know, Baba introduced me to the yogi as the head of his center. And Baba did this, you know, touched Auntie Boo's head in the west. And then Auntie Boo said, and I'm sure he thought that was my presidential robe. So cute. She got such a kick out of that. But she was able to come and sit out in the audience, so she was happy, very happy. Yes, the next morning, Baba asked everybody who got wet. And he asked Ben, he said, Ben, were you awake during the rain? And Ben teased Baba. He said, no, Baba, I fell asleep during the rain. It's so cute. So that was going on back and forth. You know, I wanted to read a message. You know, there were many discourses and beautiful messages given during that time. I didn't understand any of them. I really didn't. But Baba said not to worry about that, fortunately. But I do remember the one he said in the beginning was so sweet. Let's get it back. Well, I didn't read it when I was supposed to, but it's a message that he gave to everybody, but he gave it to us privately. Yes, here it is. Baba says, it is because of my love I have drawn you all to me. If I did not love you, you would not come to me. It is not your love that has brought you to me. It is my love that has brought you to me. It is not your love that has brought you to me. It is my love that has brought you to me. I remember that. Now, one morning, Baba had the groups alone, private, individual groups, meaning Myrtle Beach group, New York group. We went in with the Myrtle Beach group. We went over with Elizabeth and Kitty And Ruth White, I don't know if you know about Ruth, but that's another story for another time. But she was 97 by this time. She came to Baba at age 88. She lived with Elizabeth and Kitty in Myrtle Beach. Anyway, so we came in with the Myrtle Beach group. And so it's just a few of us sitting there. But Monty called me back into the back to the bedroom where the girls were staying. And Mira had a surprise for me. And the surprise was that they were going to dress me up in a sari. And I can't tell you how thrilling that was, because I had never been in a sari before. I had no idea how to wrap them, of course. And so Mira and Monty wrapped me up in this very beautiful sari. Very vivid, like a blue voile, very sheer, and a bright yellow top. And it was absolutely beautiful. And they put makeup on me the first time. That was exciting. I don't know if you all have ever had makeup put on you in India, but I mean, the menthol, they do that? They put this rod of menthol in your eyes, and you open your eye. It hurts. It stings. But then when you open your eyes, you look great. Beautiful eyelashes. And then they put a red dot here. And then, to my surprise, they pushed me out. And they said, push your Baba. Well, I was very shy about that. But, okay, I'll go out to see Baba. And Baba stopped everything. And this is just like Baba. I mean, Baba always, especially with children. And he turned to the rest of the group and said, Wendy looks very beautiful, yes? Of course, they all have to agree. Yes, Baba. So sit, like they told me to sit down at this edge of the circle, semicircle. We were all sitting on the floor. Now, what happened was Baba was not discoursing. He was drawing them out and asking them, again, questions about different groups, what was it like, what was going on in Myrtle Beach at the center, and drawing people out. And all of a sudden, Baba turns to me very quickly, and he goes, who do you love more, Mommy or Baba? And I tell you, at that moment, now this is a great learning lesson for me, at that very moment, as Baba knew, I was looking over at my mother, trying to see what she thought of my sari, if she, trying to get some sort of sense. And I started to say, Ma, I went, oh no, Baba, I love you more. Oh no. Baba's like, but looking back on that, I've thought of that a lot, of course. And I think for me, it was a reminder of to not get distracted, to put Baba first, to keep him foremost in our consciousness. So, and not to let other things get in the way. Anyway, and that Baba's love would always be paramount, more than a mother's love, And Baba would say that. And that was one of his most beautiful messages given at that gathering was how I am your father. You are children of one father. Actually, I'll finish this story. So then Baba goes on, he goes on asking questions. And then all of a sudden again he turns to me and Erich says, Baba says, always keep cheerful in my love. Very direct, right at me. And again, it was very natural, and then Baba goes on. But as you can imagine, I've thought of that countless times over the years. And has taken me, where I have come to feel that it's about, I didn't know what cheerfulness was, first of all. Didn't know really what that meant. And what I've come to feel is that it's really about developing an attitude of inner cheerfulness. Not just about the outer, that too. But to not be brought down by the things that Baba brings up in us. And not to bring others down by the things that Baba brings up in us. And that to have that inner attitude of cheerfulness, which really is another way of saying an inner acceptance of His will. And that that the effort to be cheerful is a gift that we can give Baba. And that it makes Him happy, it pleases Baba, which is what Kitty and Elizabeth always talked about. All the Mandali, as you well know, they talk about that more than anything, about pleasing Baba. that pleases him, and that in pleasing Baba it makes us happy. We feel his pleasure. So, but it takes practice, as you know. Lots of practice. Now, I think, with that afternoon, I was in back again. I really would get restless sitting out in the crowd. I'd always want to be in the back. And I loved it. I loved being back there with the women. And I loved looking out at Baba. There was a little hidey hole that was Mera's hidey hole. I didn't know it was, but found out years later that I had taken her little spot. But there was a little window. And Mera would stand there looking at Baba. But this particular time, I was standing there, and I loved standing there because I got to see Baba. Once in a while, Baba would turn and twinkle, and I knew he was twinkling at me because there wasn't anybody else back there. And I could see the back of Baba's head. He had a braid and a little pink ribbon or a blue ribbon, depending on the day. And Mera would do that, you know. Mera was the one who put the ribbon on Baba's braid in the morning. She would brush Baba's hair and then put the little ribbon. Well, this particular day, Mani finds me standing at this window, and she has in her hand the most beautiful garland of jasmine, very delicate, absolutely beautiful. What had happened was someone had to leave suddenly, and because a family member had become ill, and was so disappointed because they couldn't present this garland to Baba, which in the East is a very important thing, to be able to give that outer token of devotion. So she was frantic. Could you please give this to Baba with my love? So Mani asked me if I would like to take it out to Baba, to come right out on stage and come around. And at first, I felt shy about going out in front of all these thousands of people. But as soon as I realized, my second thought was, I get to see Baba. And that was all I wanted, really. So I said, yes, Mommy, I'll take it. And I go out, and then this time Baba asks, like he had just seen me a little while before. And Baba said, like, where have you come from? Like this. I said, Baba, Mani wants me to explain the situation a little bit. Mani wants me to give you this garland that this lady left for you. And he was so sweet. Baba leaned forward like this so that I could put the garland on him. And then he pulled me into this embrace. And I tell you, all those people disappeared. All those 15,000 people. And absolute silence. I was so struck by that whenever I was with Baba, whenever I was in his embrace, there was such absolute stillness. It was deeper than a silence. It was just no motion, no sense of time, no sense of going forward or going backward, just absolute stillness. And because of that, I never knew how long these embraces lasted. I heard they were a few seconds. I mean, Eric tells me my meeting with Baba wasn't all that long, but it felt like hours. And Baba, everyone felt that way with Baba. Baba, as you well know, makes each of us feel so special. And like we're the only one in the room, If he looks at you, that's it. You're the only person. And so that's how it was. Okay, now the last day, how are we doing with the time?
Oh, buddy.
Is that fine? Ooh. No, can't believe it. It's all right. It's all right? Okay. Okay. The next day was the last day, official day, the 4th. And I tell you, one thing that happened, Baba arranged for Qawwali music. Very special, the best, really the best in India, considered the best. And now this was the first time it had been done in the hall, in Mangali, in Guru Prasad Hall, with just us. And and it was very, very hot, and I was very tired. Being with Baba was very, I don't know how to describe it, but it was like being filled up, but at the same time being drained. You felt like everything was being pulled out of you, and at the same time you were being filled up. So it was exhausting. I was exhausted. I don't know I think other people were, I've heard, and then the heat. Well, what happened was this music began. Now, this was my first experience with Qawwali music. You know how high-pitched it is. Now, I just wasn't used to it. You know, it's like, and I was not used to it. And I was just, you know, I was trying to get into the rhythm of it. But you know how it is, they take forever to warm up. And it goes on and on. I mean, it goes on for a long time. And I thought, now I'm sitting right next to Baba at this point, and you know, the blue sofa. And I just thought I'd get a little comfortable. And so I put my elbow on the arm of the sofa. And well, as the music continued, I just thought, well, I'll just put my head down and get more comfortable. So I go all the way down, and before I know it, I'm out. And I didn't even know that I had fallen asleep. But all of a sudden, and again, I have no idea how long I was asleep, but all of a sudden, I get this nudge in my elbow. And I look up, and Mama's like, you don't like the music? And I knew he was saying, you don't like the music? And I went, oh, yes, Father. And I sat up straight. But I tell you, it was so funny. I was really very sweet, though. I love being waked up by Baba. It's a little humiliating that on the only film that I'm in, that I'm asleep. But next to Baba. But that only happened that one morning. You know, there is one more story I'd like to tell. As I say, there's so many, but yeah. What happened was, after this last day, Baba arranged for everything was arranged, prearranged, and it was arranged that we go to Meherazad and Meherbad to see Baba's home, to see the tomb, for the first time. And that was amazing. And it's where we met Muhammad for the first time. That was an amazing experience. I mean, to see him digging, you know, he was digging in a tile, digging up a tile and trying to bury a banana. And he was doing that for quite a while. He was totally focused on that. You know, I was 11, I'd never seen anything like this. It was an amazing sight. And we all just sort of stood there watching Muhammad do this. And of course, I loved his smile from ear to ear. And he'd say, and Padre was there, and Padre would say, Muhammad, where's Baba? Dada in Pune. Dada in Pune. He was so sweet. I loved his face. And then we went to Meherazad, and 12 Coats was waiting at the gate. And 12 Coats was amazing. You know, he really did wear 12 coats. And he, as a result, was quite chunky. And he was very thin himself, but, you know, he had all these coats on. And he was smoking a cigarette, and he had allowed it to burn down. And he didn't even notice. I mean, it was like he was still puffing away, but there was nothing but ashes there. And he was beaming, too. It was an amazing sight to meet these people. And I didn't really understand it. But they were delightful. And, of course, it was wonderful to see Baba's home. And his tomb. That was sad for me, to see Baba's tomb. But it was, you know, it's what Baba wanted us to see. So, well, what I'm leading up to is when we came back, well, wait a minute. You know, would it be all right if I tell one of the stories about the gazelle? May I do that? Because I really have never told that story in public, and I'd love to tell you that. It actually tags right on to the garland story. After I put the garland on Baba, I went inside back into the hall, and I don't remember this at all, but Mommy told me the story years later. I began leaping for joy and spinning, and I didn't know it. I don't remember that at all. But that's how she went and told Baba. And Baba said, yes, she's my gazelle. So that's how that came about. Thank you for saying that. But I never knew how that came until Mani told me. Anyway, okay, so we're back in Pune. We've come back, and to our surprise, Baba has sent word that anybody who is left may see him one more time. And that was a real gift, because we didn't expect to see him. We thought we had said goodbye, and that was hard to do. I felt very deeply that we would never see Baba again, physically. And I think many people felt that. There was such a sadness about this leave taking, and a poignancy about it. So imagine our joy to find out that we were getting one more glimpse of Baba, and that we could see him at Boone Gardens, that he would be leaving from there, where Babajan tree, you know, the famous tree, where Baba would sit with Babajan. And Baba was sitting, by the time when we got there, Baba was seated under the tree, and there were no discourses, no questions, total, just complete silence with Baba. And I tell you, it was so beautiful. The image that came into my mind at that time was of a huge bubble, and that we were all contained in this bubble, all of us, and that we were just suspended in air, floating like this. And that it was, again, that sense of timelessness, of no time. And, but it did end, and it was time for Baba to go. Baba, time to go. So they lead Baba to the car, and I was feeling this ache in my heart. I just was so sad. I just wanted to, so much to get up close to Baba one more time. And the crowd, there were so many people, not thousands, but hundreds. I mean, it was a big crowd. And I had been sitting not too far back, but somehow I got pushed back. And the more I tried to get closer to Baba, the more I got pushed to the back. And I kept wanting so much to get just one more time. I wanted to get up close. And I started to cry because I couldn't do it. I couldn't get close. So, but all of a sudden, somehow, the crowd parted, and I was able to get up to the window. Not to Baba's side, but the other side. This side, of the driver's side. And I was still crying because it happened so suddenly and so unexpectedly. And there I was. And I said, I was looking at Baba, and Baba turned to look at me, and Baba said, "Don't cry. I will always be with you. I will always be with you." So, that was my last glimpse of Baba, 1962. You know, I have always felt Baba has been with me, but, I haven't always felt that. Let me just say that first. I have not always felt that. But I, in recent years, have come to know that he is always with us. It's myself who has absented me from him. That because of my ignorance, my own stuff, that Baba is always available, always there. And you know how he says, you say, "I come and I go." I don't go anywhere. I am. It's you who think I come and go. I'd like to close with a beautiful quote of Kitty's, just one of my favorites, in her consciousness talk, which is included at the end of her book. Because, the ego is always there, of course, but Baba has given us a perfect way out, which is himself. We get to focus on him, and it's the way out. And Kitty speaks of that very beautifully. Here somewhere. See, I haven't been following my notes. That's what happens when you don't follow the notes. Here we go. Kitty says, "What Baba emphasized when we were with him was happiness, cheerfulness, and the importance of trying to please him, bringing us closer to loving him more and more. Looking back, I realized that above all other aspects of our early lives with Baba in India and in the West, he was silently and continuously weaving one fine thread onto the canvas. And that fine thread, as I see it today, concerned consciousness. Why, for instance, did Baba call us so frequently to be with him, to sit with him, to play various games, receive various orders and duties? I feel he was working to try to bring consciousness away from the self and away from the many objects of illusion and duality to the one object of himself. He appeared never to tire of having us around, and his constant inquiry was, "What are you thinking of?" And who could forget his smile and his twinkling eye when you could reply, of you, Baba. Thank you.